Welcome to the Lead at the Top of Your Game podcast, where we equipped you to more effectively lead your seat at any employer, business, or industry in which you choose to play. Each week, we help you sharpen your leadership acumen by cracking open the playbooks of dynamic leaders who are doing big things in their professional endeavors. And now your host, leadership tactics and organizational development expert, Karen Farrell Rhodes.
Hey there, superstars. This is Karen, and welcome to today's episode. Being a leader in the world of work and business is definitely not for the faint of heart. A normal day commonly involves tackling topics and problems that you just haven't faced before. And many leaders struggle in silence, when really they could tap into a valuable resource right at their fingertips. So on today's show, I'm honored to have as our guest a friend and fellow executive coach, Sabina Nawaz, who's the founder and CEO of Nawaz Executive Consulting Limited. She's a very sought out coach and consultant whose unique superpower involves shepherding executives through high stakes decisions while also galvanizing their teams. Be sure to stay tuned after our conversation to listen to my closing segment called Karen's Take, where I share a tip on how to use insights from today's episode to further sharpen your leadership acumen. And now, enjoy the show. Hello, superstars. This is Karen, and welcome to today's episode of the Lead at the Top of Your Game podcast. We have a supersized show for you all today. I'm very, very honored to have as our guest today a dear colleague from our Microsoft days, Miss Sabina Nawaz, who is a global CEO, a coach, a leadership expert, an author, a TEDx talk guru. She's just done some of everything. But I'm so honored to have her as our guest today. So welcome to the podcast, Sabina.
Thank you so much, Karen, for your enthusiasm, for inviting me. I'm looking forward to having supersized fun.
Yes, I am as well. And we always talk, listeners, about having our guests open up their leadership playbook. Well, Sabina has an encyclopedia to share. But of course, we can't get it all in our time together. But she does have a lot of stories and tidbits that I'm sure you're going to find valuable. Well, Sabina, before we get started, for as much as you feel comfortable, would you mind sharing with our audience a little bit about your personal background, maybe where you grew up, and then maybe a few highlights of your career journey thus far?
Wow. How much time did you say we had? I'll
Just the
try
quick
and
notes version.
I'll try and keep it short. I grew up in India and came as a junior transfer student in undergraduate university to Smith College, which is a small liberal arts women's school in Massachusetts.
Mhm.
And got my bachelor's in computer science and with a minor in electronics, and then did my master's at the University of Massachusetts in computer systems engineering. At that point, I sent out 180 job applications because I didn't know where I would get a job. And the first company to call me and make an offer was Microsoft. Now, interestingly, I had not known about Microsoft back in those days. I had to look up who William H. Gates III was and decided on a lark to fly over to Seattle and do the interview because I thought, hey, it's a free trip. I've never been to Seattle. And by my second interview, I fell in love with the people, with the vibe of the place, and did software development for over 9 years and then switched careers and ran the company's leadership development, executive development, management development, succession planning, all these things, working with Bill Gates, Steve Ballmer, and the company's leadership to shape and architect how we develop people, how we promote people, how we think strategically about organizations and their health from a people perspective. And did that for almost 6 years. Since then, I have been running my own practice, coaching CEOs, university presidents, executive directors of nonprofits, basically people at the top of the organization where the buck stops with them, on how they can become more awake, aware, and effective in doing the very hard work that they need to do, especially in these times.
And that's amazing. And as I mentioned, listeners, Sabine and I had the pleasure of sometimes working together on leadership development projects. But she had such a well-rounded, extensive career at Microsoft because you were there almost 14 years too, right?
Yes,
The
yes,
same
almost
same as
15.
me.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. I was, 14. So, but mine was all in either human resources or leadership development, and then yours was both on the business side and the executive side as
right,
well. So, yeah,
right.
we've had quite a journey together. So, because listeners, that we have such an expert on our show, what I've asked Savina to do is kind of share a little bit about what she is seeing, trends that are going on with her clients and executive coaching, because she deals with individuals from all industries at the highest levels. She's very in touch with some of the global aspects as well that is touching the world of work. And so I thought it would be invaluable to hear about what some of these business leaders are facing right now, what is top of mind for them and keeping them up at night. So Sabina, why don't you share maybe one of the first, things that you're seeing, trends that you're seeing with your coaching clients?
Karen, there are so many things, and it's hard these days where the it's shifting sands. Every day you wake up and there's a new set of challenges, major challenges on an epic scale, and they're evolving so fast. So this is really a point in time. When COVID first started, I after a while my clients all wanted to meet with me on Friday, and they said, because I want to meet with you on Friday because you tell me all the trends that have happened that week. This week is permission week. This week is empathy week. Because these things were literally thematizing, if that's a word, week
Yeah.
by week. So now, what I'm noticing is a few different things. And one of them is around managing our energy. And by energy, I mean how everything from there are a lot of things keeping us up at night, there are a lot of things vying for our attention. And there is this search for meaning and our connection to meaning and purpose between our own purpose and the purpose of the organization or institution where we work. So all of those take up energy. There's also tied with your book, Karen, around stakeholder management and how much energy is that taking up these days compared to before, because we're all in the same soup of the pressures coming from so many different places. So that energy piece is a big one right now around how do we manage the energy? How do we stave off burnout? How do we keep people's attention where they are versus that great resignation, the great migration? That's a big piece today.
It is huge. And you're right. You're so right and spot on. In the last section of my book, I talk about like what it takes to be, and you remember this term, a true leadership athlete, right?
Right.
It's all about a lot of mind, body, and soul, passions, priorities, energy management. It's a lot that mindfulness, it's a lot that goes into that. And usually there's a new challenge every day for most leaders, especially at the levels that you're coaching at. And they're having to kind of start each new day with a perspective on what it takes for them to be at their best for that particular day. Am I correct or no?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It's all of those. It's also about how do you meet other people where they are.
Oh,
This
yeah.
is not business as usual. This is not, oh, I have an agenda as the boss and I'm going to direct you on it, or I'm going to delegate it to you. I'm going to empower you. No, you might not be ready for receiving that whole fire hose of information from me. So,
Right.
how do I suss out where are you and meet you where you are? This doesn't mean that you get a free ride. So it's a tension that we need to manage between care and challenge and getting the work done.
I love that. I love
It's also about really validating other people's experiences and holding the space for experiences that are different than our own. There was a great one of those memes that floated around in LinkedIn
Uh-huh.
that said, we are not all in the same boat. We're on the same storm in different boats.
Interesting.
And isn't
Yes.
that true? right? Some of
Uh,
us have a huge mega yacht, and some of us have a kayak, and some of
yes.
us have a rowboat. And we need
Yeah.
different tools to propel us and mobilize us. We're maybe all heading in the same direction, but we're going to need different tools, different kinds of fuel to get us there, and a different sense of understanding of what it's like for the person in the rowboat, the kayak, the yacht.
I love that analogy, and you're so right. We're not all the same. Our dynamic that we are dealing with is probably a lot different than the person in the boat or yacht or rowboat next to us. You're right.
Exactly. And it's also, to me, it brings up the point about pacing. And I coach people more and more about how do you pace the work right now. You are working at warp speed because you've had 3 months to think about things. And let's say you were in the yacht and the yacht kicks up a great, huge, big wake. That's actually going to slow down the rowboat,
Yep.
because now they're not only navigating the waters without an automatic engine, they're also having to stave off the effects of the wake.
No, I agree. I agree so much. And I'm curious, Sabina, at the executive levels, do you see leaders suffering from either fear or imposter syndrome or uncertainty about how to guide their teams because of the hugely dynamic nature in the world of work? Or are you seeing more of them feeling a little bit more confident, but just needing a push in your, via your coaching? I'm just curious how they're feeling these days. How
That first part,
optimistic.
yeah, that first part, Karen,
Mhm.
it's really uncertain and uncharted territory.
Uncharted.
There
Yes.
is no leadership book on how to navigate this kind of situation, and no crystal ball that tells us what's coming next. What's the formula? This
Mhm.
is not where you can apply a tried and true, so a standard operating procedure. So
Right.
my latest Harvard Business Review article is about fear and
Yeah.
how do we deal with fear in the workplace and what's going on in the workplace. So definitely a lot of fear is palpable, both because of the macroeconomic climate, but also because of everything else that's going on. The economy is just one part of it. In the past, that would have been all consuming. And
Yes.
it's just one slice of everything that we have to face.
Yes.
The imposter syndrome for sure is coming up,
Mm.
even at the highest levels. They're also human beings. And
Right.
so they are susceptible to the same fears, uncertainties, and doubts that the rest of us are. And when we don't have answers, and when we've gotten promoted up the chain, we're used to having answers. We're used to, we're rewarded for having answers.
Yes.
Now we have to let people down by going, I don't know. We have to come up with this collectively. It's not just a single point of knowledge, a single font of expertise. We have to co-create the space we're in and the destination we're going to go to. In fact, we have to co-create the definition of that destination. Therefore, it's really easy for people who are used to having the answers and being patted on the head for that to feel inadequate and ill equipped to go, how do I lead without answers? And I think that is a big challenge of our times today for executives, is how do I lead without answers?
There it is right there. You're so right. I'm seeing that with my clients as well. They're just
Yeah.
struggling and they find a way. I find, as you talk through it with them and help them plan and ask rich questions of them, but they're uncertain and they're struggling. And those leaders that are the most resilient and taking the most data to take the best calculated risk that they can seem to be those that are the most successful. Those that are a little squirmy and not
Yes.
quite sure,
Yes.
those are the ones I have seen.
Yes.
We had a little bit more work to do in the coaching realm.
Exactly, Karen. And I don't know if you're seeing this, but the
Uh-huh.
one of the pieces that really sets them apart and builds that resilience
Mhm.
is the capacity to reflect.
Yes,
So we're so
yes,
used to jumping in the fray and do.
yes.
And when there are no answers, there is no solution. You have to learn your way into a solution. And learning requires that reflection. So you dip your toe, you gather some data, you reflect. You dip your toe again, you gather more data. So it's you build the next step and the next step iteratively based on what you're learning each time. And those who are not just learning themselves, but are transparent about that, as opposed to pretending like they have the answers and building a culture of learning, those are the ones who stand apart in my mind.
Mine too.
Yeah.
Mine
Yeah.
too.
Great.
100% agree on that. So, Sabina, let's give you an opportunity to share maybe another trend that you're seeing from your clients right now.
One of the trends is around increasing their skills around communication.
Mm.
When it comes to right now, of course, especially in the tech sector, but many other places, like a lot of nonprofits that depend on the tech sector, for example, for donations,
Mhm.
and so many other places, we're seeing layoffs.
Yes.
And layoffs are so emotionally fraught. They're so difficult for
Yeah.
everyone involved. The person, of course, who's on the receiving end of it, the people who are left behind, the
Mhm.
people who have to make the decision and decide who gets to stay and who gets to leave, and
Mhm.
then communicate that.
Yeah.
So that's one area where we have to be really mindful of how we communicate. There are areas around diversity, equity, belonging that we
Mhm.
have to become much more aware of how we communicate and what is the impact of our communication.
Mhm.
There are many socio-political issues that didn't traditionally used to be part of the workplace,
That's
but
right.
now there's
They
no
are.
the boundaries have melded. So how do you communicate? What do you say? What do you not say? How do you create an environment that's inclusive of people who might have values that clash with your own?
That's right.
And create enough of that safety. So I am noticing a lot around communication and expanding the range, like you have vocal range for a singer,
Yes.
expanding that
Yes.
communication range for each executive on
Mhm.
not just using that tried and true methods, but additional ways to connect not just with the minds, but with the hearts of people as we
Yeah.
go through these emotionally gutting experiences.
You're so spot on, Sabina. And I'm just curious, and if you don't have one, that's totally fine. I don't want to put you on the spot. But when a leader is struggling with that, um, how do you coach them on tackling it? Do you have
Yeah.
them brainstorm a few approaches and then you all kind of work together and look at the pros and cons and talk
Yeah.
them through, or do you do other things?
Well, I don't start with the mechanics of the communication. I start by looking under the hood to say, what's getting in the way of your communication and why? So recently, I was working with somebody who had to lay off a bunch of people. And they were really, their language was overly, I would call it more verbose than it needed to be,
Mm,
more
mhm,
flowery, if you will,
mhm.
uh, a lot of qualifiers before words like this is absolutely without a doubt blah blah blah, and I'm like, what's the actual word? When are you going to
Right.
get to that? You've just spent
Get to the
15
point.
words to get to this word. And I know these are culturally, there's cultural differences, but this was in North America.
Mhm.
and and what we got underneath that was their discomfort, their pain of inflicting this pain on people they had hand selected to be part of the organization, people who they thought were high performers. This was not a way for them to weed out poor performers. These were people they would hire again in a heartbeat.
Interesting.
And so what we looked at is what was behind getting using too many words. And it turned out it was this discomfort. So we had to talk through that and figure out how to adjust the language based on the discomfort they were feeling. The
Yeah.
other thing they tended to do then is use terms that were more definite than actually they than the reality. For example, they might say, "Oh, I'm going to make sure we never have layoffs again." You know,
Something that they
well,
can't guarantee, right?
that's not within your control,
Right.
right? This was a medium-sized organization,
Mhm.
a couple thousand people. That's a lot of burn rate. What will happen if your sales don't take off?
Yes.
You might have to do that again. So,
Right.
so being really mindful about what's weaving in, and all of this was because they felt bad and they wanted to salve the sting, the immediate sting.
They took
And
more
what was
control.
instead showing up is that they're showing up as more anxious. Now,
Yes.
if you show up as that anxious, it's going to leak into the psyche of your people
It will. And it can also create distrust if there's contradictions in your
later
messaging,
on.
right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Oh God. Yeah, absolutely. Sabine, think of a time where, and I don't want you to mention a company or any names because I'm going to keep everybody protected. But think of a time with one of your clients where they were in the midst of what I call a leadership fail, if you will, or they're struggling, not doing as well as they needed to do, or made a major misstep in executing their role. What's an example of a root cause that you all worked out? What was the root cause of them making a misstep? What is an example of one?
Again, Karen, how much time do we have? There's so many,
I
and
know, right?
these are some of the times when people come to me most, as I'm sure
Yeah.
they come to you as
Yes.
well.
Yes.
One of them was, I'll call this person Adam. That's not
Okay.
their real name,
Sure.
and who was initially killing it with business results, doing a great job, awesome, and super smart, super intellectually smart. And then got called into the boss's office, thought that it was about a promotion, and instead it was a call to the principal's office. So it was I'm getting a lot of complaints about how you're leading.
Mhm.
You're being a jerk
Mhm.
and a bully, and you are not getting a promotion. In fact, you better shape up or else. And so this was this big moment of reckoning for
Yeah.
Adam. And we worked together. I interviewed almost 2 dozen of Adam's colleagues,
Mhm.
direct reports, peers, management, so on.
Yes.
And they had just terrible things to say about him,
Mm.
of
Oh.
how he was coming across really harshly, how he made jokes that cut,
Mm.
how he cut people down in other ways, how he interrupted folks all the time, that it seemed like he wanted to show up as the smartest person in the room,
Mm.
and so on.
Yes.
Now, the big realization for Adam was that, I mean, the first, I don't know if there was a single root cause, there was so many issues, but one of them was that Adam actually had no idea he was coming across that way.
He
He
wasn't
had no
aware.
idea
Wow.
because it's a
Because no one shared the feedback with
no one shared the feedback because they were scared of him, and the more scared they are, the less honest they are, the less honest they are, the less he knows. So he continues to bully and badger people. So it becomes a negative loop,
him? Yes.
right?
Yes.
And it's a mess. So first he had no idea. So his jaw was just scraping the floor. The second is that he actually thought the things he was doing them deliberately because he thought they were good for the business.
Oh, geez.
Right. So
I bet
so
that was a gut punch to him realizing how he's
yes,
really coming
because
over,
he's like,
right?
the reason I speed people along is I have lots of experience here. I've done several mergers and acquisitions. I know exactly what needs to be done. So I'm cutting to the chase. Well,
Right.
you're cutting to the chase, but you're making everyone else look stupid in the process. And so, how can you do both and versus either or? And so, so that was a big moment for him, is understanding, one, nobody is telling me the truth because of how I'm coming across. And
Mhm.
it's a cycle that feeds on itself.
Yes.
And secondly, the very things I think are good for the business are actually completely boomeranging and throwing up all over over me. So that was
Oh,
one example.
what a
And,
great
and
story.
another one was this CEO who comes across as incredibly forceful, very sort of dominant in meetings. And often when you have a title, you're already, people give you a lot of sort of pedestal room, but also his personality was pretty like, let's get to it. And he spoke up early and he spoke up often. So he comes across as this very quote unquote strong personality. Yet he had three people on his leadership team of eight who were not the right fit.
Ugh.
They were creating a pretty toxic environment. They were also not getting the work done.
Yes.
There were a lot of problems. And he tolerated that for way too long,
Mm.
to the point that good people then started leaving. And so what we recognized was, even though he presented at this as this very strong personality, dominant person in the room,
Yes.
inside he was really soft-hearted.
Mm.
And it was really hard for him to pull the trigger on somebody, to say, okay, you're out of here. What he wasn't realizing is that by not doing that, that was a decision as well.
Yes.
And that decision was impacting, instead of three people, it was impacting hundreds of people.
The whole teams. Yeah. Amazing. And did he find the courage or the resiliency to kind of course correct a bit in changing his behaviors?
Absolutely. We worked through a lot of it. Those three people did exit. He almost had to start from scratch to rebuild. So he definitely needed a lot of resilience to rebuild, and has been doing great. It was a very expensive but helpful lesson on not just who to attract, but how to build a team that played well with each other.
Excellent. And I bet he will remember that at his probably the rest of his
Yes.
life, right?
Yes.
Oh, wonderful. Well, Sabina, I also want to feature um, your expertise in a lot of your services because listeners, for those that aren't familiar, Sabina does a lot of writing for like the Harvard Business Review. Gosh, I don't even know all the publications. There's like, I'm not sure if you're doing Forbes, but I've seen you in, was it Inc. or there was another business
Forbes,
magazine?
Inc., Wall Street Journal, Harvard
Yes,
Business Review. Yep.
she's everywhere. And one of the things that I always love about her articles is she always couches it in a story, a brief story that help you give context. He makes it real for you, and then talks about how to work through the situation or solution. So you definitely need to follow her writings. But in addition to that, Sabina, if individuals were interested in considering an executive coach and want to check you out, can you give some thoughts on how they can, reach you? And
Absolutely. I mean, they can go to my website, sabinanawaz.com, or my LinkedIn profile. But the best way would probably be to go to, say, a Harvard Business Review and check out my articles. Because, Karen, as you said,
Mhm.
we can all talk theory,
Yeah.
but stories are what bring it to life from a practical perspective. And remember, I was raised as an engineer in my profession. So once an engineer, always an engineer, is what's the practical payoff here? And those stories will show you exactly how this situation and this person dealt with this particular challenge. I
Mhm.
have often had my phone ring after one of my articles gets published, and the
Uh-huh.
person goes, "How did you know me? You don't know me, but that was me you were writing about." Because, we all like to think we're special and we're different. And I jokingly tell my clients, or affectionately tell my clients, you're not special. There are,
Oh, more
you're
alike
not
than different.
alone. Exactly what you're experiencing makes a lot of sense. What you're experiencing is very normal and normative. So look at those scenarios. And if those scenarios seem familiar to you, you may not even need to hire me as a coach. You can read my articles and follow the advice there and see how far you get.
Right. But they're gonna wanna talk to you because they probably have more to work out than they can just get from an article, but it is a definite window into some of your insight and your expertise, so I just wanted to make sure we give that an extra plug.
Thank you, Karen.
All right. Well, before we let you out of here, and listeners, we will have information about Sabina in the show notes, so be sure to check that out. There will be those links that we mentioned as well. But we're going to end with our final segment called Full Disclosure. And Sabina, it will never be a gotcha question, but we like to end with some fun facts about yourself that you don't mind sharing. So, my first question to you is, what was your first job ever? Was it Microsoft or were there other things that you did in India?
First job as like a professional, first job that I got paid money for.
Yes.
Okay, that was when I was, I think it was 12 or early teens,
Huh?
and I had to tutor a girl who was 3 or 4 years older than me, neurodiverse, and tutored her in English and math. And
Oh,
I think I
interesting.
started to tap into my love of growing people from that first job.
That is amazing. I did not know that about you. Oh, that was fantastic. Where is one of your favorite places to go on vacation?
That is such a tough question. I love going to so many places. I love, love, love to travel.
Yes,
So
me
I'll
too.
just refer to our most recent trip, which was
Okay.
an epic trip to Iceland.
I have not been to Iceland yet. What did you love? One thing that you loved about Iceland?
These one things are killing me, Karen,
I
because
know,
there's
I
so much,
know.
right? If actually, and if you're planning a trip to Iceland,
Uh-huh.
I'll send you the link that my son did this video
Yes.
for the whole trip, which was really incredible.
Oh,
Um,
yes, I definitely wanna take a look.
yeah, so Iceland in 15 Days by Powderhound or something like that, but I'll send you the link.
Okay.
And I think the one thing I would say is the diversity of natural beauty and the scale of the natural beauty, because in the
Mm,
same trip you're seeing geysers and glaciers, like separated by a half-hour journey.
that's
You're
incredible.
seeing volcanic craters and you're seeing miles and miles of just empty land. So the contrast is stunning.
Oh, that is amazing. Well, it's definitely on my bucket list, so we'll have to huddle afterwards and send me that link so I can take a
You
look.
bet. You bet.
And then my final question for you, let's see. What is one thing or hobby that you do that most people don't know? Or what is one unique thing about you?
Well, before I had kids, it was stunt fighting. Mm, I did a
Fighting.
lot of theater work, and I was getting trained in stunt fighting, and I just loved it.
Oh,
Now I am not doing that. But the thing that perhaps most people don't know is as many times as I can, but at least once a week, I join a Bali X class, which is a hit workout, but it's to great music. And so I just leave with a grin on my face at the end of it.
I can only imagine. I can only imagine. And you get a workout too, right?
Absolutely.
Oh, that's wonderful. Well, thank you, Miss Sabina, for being such a sport on our final segment of Full Disclosure. And once again, thank you for being on our podcast and giving us the gift of your time and expertise. We really appreciate it.
Karen, thank you so much for the connection, and happy to answer any questions people have as they reach out. Please do reach out if you have questions.
All right. So, audience members, please do check out the show notes. Reach out to Sabina. I promise you, you won't be disappointed. She's an excellent, excellent coach and colleague. And also share this episode with your friends. Also, like and rate it so that we can expand our reach. And we look forward to speaking with you on the next episode. You take care. Bye bye. Well, I hope you enjoyed our conversation today with Sabina Nawaz, founder and CEO of Nawaz Executive Consulting Limited. Links to her bio, her entry into our leadership playbook, and additional resources can be found in the show notes, both on your favorite podcast platform of choice and on the website at leadyourgamepodcast.com. And now for Karen's take on today's topic of leading through uncharted territory. When reflecting on my past consulting engagements, I wish I had $1 for every time I'd hear the executive leader say, Karen, we've never been here before. And if you're a leader and you're leading through times of ambiguity, it can really feel like a constant punch in the gut, especially when your job or business is on the line, right? When nothing is written and no path is marked and no rules apply anymore, you may ask yourself, how in the world can we reinvent our leadership to bring about courage, commitment, resiliency, and creativity? And while the answer will depend upon your specific situation, I do want to share 3 quick tips for you to keep in mind. The first is assemble a powerhouse of a problem-solving team. What I mean by this is pull together individuals who have the best knowledge, skills, and abilities to help you build an informed strategy to address whatever it is you're facing. The second tip is to remember that credibility at this time matters more than ever. All your team or audience wants to know is what you're going to do to lead them out of the chaos. And I truly advocate communicate. In a communications vacuum, they're going to create a story in their heads, which may result in, really catapulting their level of angst to an insanely destructive high. And then the third tip I'd love to share is to be willing to ditch your assumptions to admit you are wrong if necessary. This is the moment that you should listen to a diversity of perspectives, experiment and try new things, and if you face failure, just own it and move on by course correcting. Easily embarrassed leaders don't get very far in times of crisis. And if you or a colleague are facing difficult times in the world of work and could use a thought leader or a coach, definitely reach out to me at Karen, Karan, at shockingly.different.com, and I'll be happy to help you personally or connect you with an expert who can. And please be sure to share our podcast with your network of supporters, because we'd love to share tips with them as well as we could use the additional subscribers. Thank you so much for your support of the Lead at the Top of Your Game podcast. Thanks for listening, and see you next week. Bye-bye. And that's our show for today. Thank you for listening to the Lead at the Top of Your Game podcast, where we help you lead your seat at any employer, business, or industry in which you choose to play. You can check out the show notes, additional episodes, bonus resources, and also submit guest recommendations on our website at leadyourgamepodcast.com. You can follow me on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn by searching for the name Karen Rhodes, with Karen being spelled Karan. And if you like the show, the greatest gift you can give would be to subscribe and leave a rating on your podcast platform of choice. This podcast has been a production of Shockingly Different Leadership, a global consultancy which helps organizations execute their people, talent development, and organizational effectiveness initiatives on an on-demand project or contract basis. Huge thanks to our production and editing team for a job well done. Goodbye for now.